Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Marketing Monday. I'd like to flash you back to 1936. And in 1936, there was a group of 50 auto workers on a GM assembly line in Flint, Michigan. And on that day, a different day than any other, they sat down at their stations to build cars, and simultaneously, all 50 of them refused to work. These 50 people were part of a fledgling group that had just formed in secret called the United Auto Workers. And they were in secret because at the time, companies would not recognize any form of a union. You weren't allowed to discuss it. You weren't allowed to unionize. You weren't allowed to talk about it with your coworkers. And this small strike transformed America. Now, there have been a lot of strikes in American history, especially in the period of the 30s following the Great Depression or around the Great Depression. But these guys did something different. They did what's called a sit-in strike, where basically they sat there, mostly white asses down, and refused to listen. Now, what was different is because for all previous strikes, they would follow a similar pattern where the strikers would surround the building, create a picket line, try to let people through, and get beaten the shit up by police. Basically, police and the local government were always in cahoots with the big business leaders of the town. And they would support the business and basically sick the police on any strikers. And there would be violence. People would often fire into crowds, and they would break up the strikes. And the strikes had tough gaining traction. These 50 workers, which, by the way, the only thing they were asking was to be recognized as a union. That's what they wanted. They didn't get that, so they struck. So when they sat down, the big change of this, number one, because they occupied the seat where they worked, scabs could not easily get in and work. They were sitting in the factory, so nobody else could come in and use it to build the things. They couldn't get a scab in. Number two is that the business leaders did not value their lives, but they valued the lives of the property around them. So they were very hesitant to send in police and start a riot because that would break their machinery that's very expensive and important. So all of a sudden, this sit-in strike actually sort of worked. Now, there was still plenty of violence. Police surrounded the building. They threw tear gas in, but the union people inside refused to leave. Eventually, they just shot randomly into the building, killing 13 people. But again, they refused to leave. They continued to sit around. And they had some rules, too. They had rules that made them more palatable, more supportable by the average populace. Number one, they would not bring any liquor inside when they were on their sit-in. No liquor, no violence, no raising their voice, no damaging company property. All they would do is sit down and refuse to work until they were acknowledged and negotiated with by the management. And because of this, it was very hard for the average public to be told they were demons or they were bad guys or they were ruining things because they were asking for a simple ask and they weren't causing any ruckus. They were just making their point. Because of all this, because of the violence against them and because of their nonviolent protests, they made real progress. The second thing that the companies tried to do to shut them down was they got a judge to do an official injunction ordering strikers to evacuate the plant. This is GM. GM, the most powerful car company in the world at the time. The UAW, the fledgling small United Auto Workers, had a press conference immediately afterwards and revealed that the judge who issued that decree owned $219K worth of GM stock in the 30s. That's multiple millions of dollars. Interesting. I wonder if there's any parallels to having extremely old political elite who also has vested interest in the big businesses having power over workers. Anyway, this was embarrassing. This was very embarrassing for the political elite, and the governor also had his own 104K in GM shares. He sold them discreetly, and he started to back off of allowing police to harass these workers. So finally, as a final step, GM goes all the way to the president of the United States. They go, we need to send in the National Guard and break up this widely growing strike. Unfortunately, the president in 1936 was FDR, one of the greats, one of my favorite presidents, all-time great. And FDR thought about it, listened to their statements, and said, if I were a factory worker, I would join a union. And he refused, unlike previous presidents in the past, to send in the National Guard to help a business beat its workers. And because of all of these things combined, GM was actually forced to recognize and negotiate with the union. And you know what they got? It was like a 5% pay increase. That was their big thing they wanted, was a 5%. But the important thing was they had to actually recognize the union and negotiate with them, which meant that over 136,000 people who had participated in the widely growing sit-in strike became the strike heard round the world. It was so successful from such a humble beginning, people everywhere started to join it. The movement started to pick up. And the United Auto Workers suddenly was kind of fully born on the stage that day and gained a lot more workers. It was the birth of the UAW. They had won a great victory not only for themselves, but the entire labor movement in the United States. People that were originally reluctant to join signed up by the thousands. The second they beat GM, they started on Chrysler, which is the second largest automaker, and they won there. Then next year they beat Ford. So they had beaten the big three automakers, established a baseline for working class relations, a huge surge in the labor movement, and eventually the next 30 years had some of the best growth for the American middle class. So look at this. As you can see right here, the time period we're talking about, there was this massive surge in union membership. At the same time, the amount of income that went to the very top decreased dramatically. Basically, they just split it so that more of the income from all these very profitable factories went to the people actually building it. And that was great for like 30 years. I mean, we had the largest American middle class, people could afford to live. And then right around here, this circle, this guy shows up. And he is not like FDR. His name's Ronald Reagan. You may have heard of him. And one of his first acts as president to kick off the 80s is he decides, I'm going to brutally crush the air traffic controller strike. He just completely fires all of them immediately, cuts all their pay, brings in complete scabs, has the full force of the government behind it. There's nothing they can do, and crushes it. And from that period, basically to now, we had massive declines in union membership. Corporations are given free rein to basically bust unions however they feel fit, and the government would tacitly support them. And because of that, more and more of the money that was being remained in the economy went back to the very top people. 100 years later, after this very first strike that we talked about, we come to today in 2023, where the United Auto Workers are on strike again. And unlike some other strikes in America, they are universally popular. 75% of Americans side with the striking UAW members. I support all the strikes, but in general, this one's harder to get average people to care about. They just don't care about whether actors get paid more or not, as I've found. But for this one, 75% of Americans across political lines support regular people who work factory jobs in America getting paid enough to live. And if you think about it, 75% of Americans don't agree on anything. Pizza toppings, whatever. There's nothing, even simple things. And so to get 75% to agree on this is a huge deal. And the United Auto Workers right now are striking against Ford, GM, and Stellantis. Stellantis is the modern day version of Chrysler, basically. These big three make up basically every car brand in America. It's one of the largest strikes we've had in 19, 20 years. And this is what they're asking for. And they have pretty big demands. They want a 30 to 40% pay increase. They want the end of the two-pronged pay structure. I'll explain that. They want a shorter work week, cost of living raises, retirement benefits, and representation at EV battery plants. They have a serious list of demands they're asking of their employers. Okay? If you flash back to the 1980s, if you come to the table with these demands, you don't get shit. So what happened this time? Let's flash back to 2008 when we had the last economic crisis. The American economy was in the dumps. Sorry, I guess the editor needs to cut that out. And the big three automakers were in trouble. They had bad loans. The economy was bad. People couldn't buy cars. Gas prices soared. And so they basically got the union to agree to concessions. The UAW said, okay, to keep the businesses afloat, we will agree to sacrifice job security, sacrifice retiree health care, basically take lower pay to keep you from going into bankruptcy. Unfortunately, that negotiation in 2008 basically bottom ticked the market. This is Ford stock. Exactly as they made that negotiation, the government started printing money like crazy. There was bailouts. Things started bouncing back. And they agreed to these long-term deals as Ford stock started to rebound massively, and the economy in general started to rebound. And so they were stuck with a deal made at the lowest part of the market before everything started to bounce back. And it's never returned to that level, okay? So in that time, where has all the extra money gone? Like, as the company has grown and the workers are all locked into a pretty bad deal, where has the money gone? This is where it stopped right here. The red line is CEO compensation, realized CEO compensation. Do you think it's gone down, flat, or up? It skyrocketed. So all that excess money that wasn't going to the workers because they took this bad deal all went basically to the management. Not even back to the investors, not to people that own Ford stock, basically just to the management. The CEO to worker pay ratio is 365 to 1 at Stellantis, 362 to 1 at GM, and 281 to 1 at Ford. If the bosses are raking it in, shouldn't the employees be too? It's a serious question. Currently, the members of the UAW are working 60 to 80 hours a week just to make ends meet. And they locked in a deal back in the day, back when things were good, for 40 hours a week. So something has shifted. All of the rights they fought for, decades and decades ago, have been eroded. They're getting paid less and they're working longer. And so finally it's time with this strike to try and win some of that back. Also, they have this two-pronged pay system, which is basically like based on when you joined and what the contract was when you joined, you could get paid $18, $22, or $32 an hour for the same job. And that two-tier wage system is something that's been fought and won against by people like the UPS, who got their employer to axe it. Finally, the last thing they want is about EVs, which is basically like, okay, cars are changing. and they're making new plants for electric vehicles, and these plants are not unionized. The United Auto Workers are worrying, like, as EVs grow, are you just going to cut us out of all of our deals? And so they want protections against that. They want to be able to unionize the EV plants as well. And so this is all the things they want. And how do they get these things? If they have these five massive demands that we talked about, how do they get these things? So normally, a union strategy, this is like the normal union strategy. All in, baby. Put all your chips on the table day one. We make a big picket line, we make a big stink, and we try to scare them into doing it. The problem is, this is very hit or miss. It's very risky. Because if the company has a lot of cash or can afford to wait it out, like the studios are trying to do versus the actors, then eventually your average worker feels the sting. They feel like they can't afford their bills, they need to go back to work, and they're willing to take a shitty deal. This all-in strategy is high risk, high reward. But UAW, as I mentioned, from even back in the very beginning, when they invented this sit-in strike, has always been innovative. So for this round, they tried something entirely new called the walkout strike, or basically the stand-up strike. The stand-up strike. This new tactic where they're going to keep working at all three factories, but randomly, at any time, they will pick one factory and just have everybody stand up and leave. And they can do it at any time randomly. So the businesses can never plan for it. And so because of this, they can make the strike last way longer because everyone's still employed. And then two, they can play the companies against each other. For example, right off the bat, this is day one, by day 7, they had decided to strike only at GM and Stellantis factories, but not Ford, because Ford was negotiating. So when they started the strike, Ford's like, okay, we'll talk. And so they said, Ford, we're not going to strike, no stand-ups. But they picked 2 GM and Stellantis plants and they stood up and left. And so because of that, because they could actually play the companies against each other, the companies started to get a little nervous because no company wants to lose against the other one. Unlike the writer's strike, which had a real tough time with this because they were striking against all of the United studios who were lockstep together, no breaking alliance. This one put the companies against each other, which was pretty good.
We chose to not hit them at this point, and as long as we get to a good point with them, then we won't have to. But if things go backwards, we'll take action there too.
So you can see, like, as long as Ford agrees to negotiate, they don't get hit. Then by day 14, Ford wasn't doing good in negotiation, so they expanded the strike against them. By day 20, he was making fun of it on the social media. This is Sean Fain, the president of the UAW. That was this guy right here. Tune in to find out who gets the rose. They were making a game out of which one they were going to strike against. And because they were making this last a lot longer and they were playing with each other, they were making real progress without spending all of the resources. Most people were still at work, but a business can't run if it's unpredictably going to have factories shut down. By day 21, GM, which has been struck against the whole time, started to feel the pain and made some concessions. GM agreed to have all future EV battery plants be covered by the same labor agreement. The strike is working, so they hold off on the walkouts. Again, it's carrot and stick. They made some progress, so they held off on the walkouts.
Hey UAW family, just wanted to give you a quick update. We are here at Ford's Dearborn headquarters, and unfortunately we've had to escalate our action. Bargaining committee here at Ford's been busting their asses, working hard for the membership, Vice President Browning and the whole team. We came here today to get another offer from Ford. Unfortunately, this offer was the exact same offer they gave us 2 weeks ago. In our position, they're not taking this serious. We've been very patient. We had to take action, and we made a call to President Todd Dunn. John Jagger was able to let Todd Dunn know that at 6:30 this evening they are to walk out and go on strike. And
so again, that's what they had an answer for every step of the way. Instead of having put all their chips on the table at once, every time something good or bad happened from the companies, they were able to punish or respond in a certain way. Then the bargaining started to work. After 26 days, you know what I'm saying? 26 days is not a long time. But they had made incredible progress in the first couple weeks. Think of how long. The writer's strike was over 100 to make any sort of progress. In 26 days, they made real progress. And then by day 30, it was calm seas, okay? Day 32, calm seas. Nothing was happening. It's been a long time since the last incident. Everyone's still working. And they've proven that they've got some arrows in their quiver. Then, day 38, the tsunami hit. The negotiations hadn't exactly gotten what they wanted, so they made a big show of force. Massive strike at Stellantis' largest factory. 6,800 workers all walked off at once, hitting one of the Ram truck makers' most profitable plants. The most profitable plant for Stellantis randomly walked out. GM reported to the markets in Wall Street that the strike had already cost them $800 million. That same day, UAW did another strike on them. Another 5,000 workers walked out. Their stock tanked. After UAW had done a massive strike here and a massive strike here, and they hadn't made progress with Ford, it was very obvious what was going to happen next. Except it didn't happen because the CEO of Ford,
if it continues, it will have a major impact on the American economy and devastate local communities.
the CEO of Ford, who was a deer in the headlights scared, he cracked, dude. He didn't want one of these. And he became the first of the big three to crack. He made the labor agreement ending the strike.
Ford knew what was coming for them on Wednesday if we didn't get a deal. That was checkmate. On day 40 of the stand-up strike, we reached a historic agreement.
40 days to basically break Ford into getting the deal that they wanted. By the way, the deal, incredible. So remember those things they wanted? This one, they got. This one, they got. This one, they didn't get 32-hour work week, but they did get increased PTO, so less overall hours per year. Cost of living raises, got it. Retirement benefits, got it. Urban digital EV plants, I'll go into that, but yes, they got some here. So a major deal from Ford. And that is the first domino. So again, now Ford, which is one of these guys' main competitors, if you're Stellantis or GM and you see Ford factories working and yours not, that gets a little spooky because they're going to lose market share. So immediately Stellantis is like, fuck this, we can't hold out. So Stellantis on day 43 also makes a deal. So now two of the big three have made the same deal. So now Ford and Stellantis defeated, and that leaves only GM. GM, like I said, are left holding this boulder. They're the last one still holding off against the strike, and GM is a powerful enough company. They're not big enough to be a sole holdout against two other competitors. And because they're the only one left, the United Auto Workers started hammering them. So Stellantis is free, Ford is free, and all GM fans are getting more and more walkouts. So finally, they make a deal. This has just happened. This is like yesterday. So GM finally cracked. And that means within a relatively short period of time, the workers at UAW got almost everything they asked for by only striking at a few plants. Think about that. Every one of those workers is getting like 30 to 40% pay raises, better protections. They didn't have to stop work at a lot of places. A lot of people didn't even stop work, which means like, and this is from them, but the strike worked. And the original offer that GM gave them at the beginning of the strike doubled in like 40 days. They doubled it. I mean, they folded so quick when they were faced with a real strategy. And the UAW put out this great Twitter thread about their stand-up strike, which will go down in history as an inflection point for our union and our movement. It reminds me of the original inflection point of 1936 that I talked about when they first did the sit-down strike and innovated way back in the day. They're doing it again today. And one cool thing they did, as I mentioned in a previous video about the writer's strike, is these guys did not get bent over a barrel on the ending date. They proposed an expiration date of 2028. So they got a 5-year deal instead of a 3-year deal, and they made sure it ended on International Workers' Day, so that if they get on the next time around, they're going to begin strike on May Day, and they're asking every single other strike that's going on right now to try and do the same thing. Worker unions around the world can sort of strike in solidarity. If they get bad deals, they're going to go to strike on May Day. And the headlines rolled in. Auto workers score big win. Detroit is paying up to end the UAW strike. And as we roll in to the ending of a hot labor year, healthcare workers are on strike. Actors are still on strike. Hotel workers are on strike. Teachers are on strike. And we're seeing a chance for this to be the beginning of possibly another era like this, dude, where we have higher and active union membership that's supported by people and ideally the president, and we can get a larger share of income to people actually working these jobs instead of going increasingly just to the weird management layer. Again, not even to the investors in the company. It just goes to the CEO and their cronies to just milk all the company. It's been one of the biggest problems in America for like 30 years, and I'm excited to see some progress on this front. It's really cool to see how big of a win this UAW strike was. Really, top to bottom, they got a ton of things they wanted in a short period of time and proved the efficacy of like labor support and strategy and just the value they offer. I'm impressed top to bottom. That's it. Thanks for watching Marketing Monday. Back next Monday. Battle report. He's on strike. What am I gonna do? he's doing a stand-up strike. He walked out. You gotta support him. Gotta support him on that.